try to put together just a very final thing, just to kind of try to wrap up at least my perspective of this disease. And I'm going to blame Erin. She gave me a talk title. It says, Your Best Life with Autoimmune Hepatitis. Now, if you know me, I would never pick a talk title like this. So I had to rebrand it, and you can tell by the painting in the background if you recognize. We moved clouds to happy little clouds. So Bob Ross is a favorite of mine, and I had a patient tell me, we talking about the drudgery of this disease and how bad this is, but her perspective was, well, let's move clouds to happy little clouds. So that resonates with me. So this talk is clouds to happy little clouds. So the aims of this talk is just to review why it can be so challenging for patients with AIH to live their best life. And you're going to see a lot of similarities with my fatigue talk as well. But I'm going to ask you to consider a change, the story you tell yourself with autoimmune hepatitis, and change the narrative. Review strategies to kind of improve coping. I'll give you anecdotal, some data-driven stuff. But what do my successful patients do? And again, so this is just some experiential pieces as well. So why is the patient course with this disease so challenging? This is going to sum up a number of things. I did the same thing. So there's our clock again. But I'm going to say this is a chronic disease. And many of you, you don't even know when it started. You think you know when it started. You know when your first abnormal liver test. And then we also don't know when it will end. Will you be able to get off medication? But again, this is not a normal disease where you get sick, you get treatment, and you get fixed. More on that in a second. The treatment itself, it's antiquated. It's solidified on corticosteroids. And these medications carry substantial medication side effects. You've heard all about it this week, and we need to do just better. These treatments are old, and they are not targeted for any specific patient populations. The symptoms are numerous. Sometimes they don't even make sense to patients. They don't make sense to the people that live with you sometimes as well, which makes it even challenging. Again, you get that comment. You guys don't look sick at all. The definitive diagnosis is also really dependent on liver biopsy. And healthcare providers, they can be good, they can be bad, but sometimes they still don't get it. They still miss it. And I think part of our perspective is that delay in diagnosis is still a problem with this disease because of how sometimes patients can present kind of innocuously. Only 50% of patients are symptomatic with maybe jaundice or itch at the time of presentation. And then research, you've heard a little bit about the research, but if I would have given this talk maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and maybe I did, there was nothing like we have now. So we have seen improvement. It is taking off, but it still remains years of that behind things such as psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, even inflammatory bowel disease. So let me get a little bit kind of theoretical for you. So in the case of health, illness narratives, more specifically, again, it centers on this idea of a healthy body that becomes sick will inherently get better again. So do you know who this is? This is Robert Smith, The Cure. So seeking a cure, restitution narrative, it really centers on the idea that I get sick, I fix it, or a doctor fixes it, I get better. But what about those diseases that don't get better? What does the narrative change to? So when restitution's no longer available, we sometimes move into this area of chaos, and it's thrust upon our lives. And again, chaos is a complete 180 from restitution. And some of you may be in the stage of your disease course right now of chaos. Sometimes this chaos is really so bad that it provokes anxiety, and we start to see our vulnerability and our fragility. We get knocked down so easily. But chaos can sense really that no one's in control, and that lack of control is feared by many. So sometimes you have to stand outside of chaos. And when you do that, maybe you can get a more coherent story. So I believe no matter what AIH patient you are, what your disease story is to date, I think some degree you can actually write a quest narrative. And that quest narrative is actually where patients move forward in their life despite illness or adversity. So what has helped my patients get there? I think at the center of it is gaining very good, correct knowledge about their disease. The possibilities of recurrence or symptoms, the possibility of relapse, the role of controlling external factors that they have control over. They also then do better when their family has an awareness of this disease. Their support system is there. The key factors being they know what that chronic illness is. They know that what may face them in the future, what symptoms may have. So again, those patients coming with caregivers to clinic are just better grounded. So I put together a few parting comments, ideas, and these anecdotes, again, about what successful patients do and do well often. That being said, it's almost never just one of these categories. I think you have to think of these three categories as kind of a woven web. So I think there's things you can do at home, the community, and healthcare to overall live your best life or move your clouds to happy little clouds. So I'm going to bring up journal again. And Caitlin, I was so excited that you talked about what you do with your, what do you call it? Is it a happiness journal, gratitude? I love this idea. And again, this is something that a lot of people don't do. With this, a journal would be a perfect extension of it. I ask my patients to really be a student in themselves. Do not be passive, and that's part of that integration into that care model. Diet and nutrition. I've talked a little bit about Mediterranean diet. I don't still know what the best approach is, but I would like to believe in the next year we'll have a better understanding. But there are a few kind of key points. This hydration piece I talked about before, 64 fluid ounces of water, starting your day with a full glass of water, increasing with hot weather and exercise, avoiding ultra-processed foods, really subscribing to lean proteins and fish, fruits and vegetables, fiber, and then habitually what covers most of that is the Mediterranean diet. Again, centered on caregivers, coming to doctor's appointments, engaging, taking notes for the patient, helping them with cultivating questions, identifying stressors in your life, and getting to someone to help you sooner. The hepatologist, unfortunately, I don't think that's the office that I need to be identifying that you have higher risk for mental health issues. I really, when I find that, I feel like the primary care doctor has failed the patient in some sense. And again, I always worry it's because those patients are too complex, so they didn't dig deep enough. Take your sleep serious. We've talked about this already. Exercise, again, avoid inactivity. But I will plead with you to have some grace with yourself when those days are tough, when you can't do the bed exercises. But realize tomorrow's a new day, and in fact, you may feel ready for those exercises at that time as well. The paradigm at home and in the office, I'll say, is a little bit weird for this the treatment for this disease. So as a hepatologist, my goal is to get your liver test normal and your IgG. But this fails. So again, I think we have to shift what our expectations are, what our goals are on at home. So again, maybe it's a goal of getting the mail today. I didn't have to depend on anybody else. Is it measurable? Well, I got the mail for the past week every single day. Is it achievable and realistic? Yes, I can do that, and I can track that. So I'd like to take that framework to all your goals, whether it's activity, whether it's relationship, whether it's relationship with your doctors or primary care doctors. I think these are incredibly important, and again, track it in your journal. Moving to your community, this is my plug for the AIHA. We need patients, and we need patients integrated with science and researchers, and we are that outlet. Working with doctors, working with scientists to understand what are the important questions for AIH patients have, how can they steer the disease. Again, our studies looking at mesenchymal stem cells as well as diet really came from patients wanting more for better treatments and better symptom control. But this is the model. Expert patients, you have now taken a crash course in AIH. No matter if you're a new diagnosis or old diagnosis, you are professional. You have feedback. You can tell patients online, well, I heard Lammert say this about fatigue this past week, and maybe this is applicable to you. Patients that have been there and done that harbor a wealth of information, and I love more than anything looking in the Facebook groups and seeing Arishi McRae say, girl, you got this. I had the same problem. Try this, just as an example. Engaging in our support networks. We know social support is so critically important. And again, our support groups with our focus groups and the Zoom support groups have given so much to patients and families. They are going strong. It's something I would ask you to engage in, and if you haven't joined one, please consider it, because I think, again, that's another place of a wealth of information. So, your local office. So how do you inform your gastroenterologist, hepatologist, and primary care? I think you need to talk about your disease. I think you got to realize the healthcare staff or allied staff that don't understand it. We'll talk a little bit more about stigmatization from those providers and how do you either lean against it or run away from it. But I do think that by informing your local office may help the next patient with AIH. Research here in our community, any opportunities, I would love for you to engage in. I know sometimes it's a headache, sometimes it's too many surveys, but this is the only way we'll move this disease forward. We need your partnership. A few kind of quirky things. One part of this talk I joked with Aaron is I wanted to do a talk to how to be a good patient. And everybody laughed because, well, we need to have the how to be a good doctor, obviously, parallel that. So I don't want this to come off weird, but let me ask, do you use your doctor visits well? And I think there's, again, there's a few of my patients in the room, so again, I hope I'm not giving any examples away. But how many patients come prepared to my clinic? Not many. Nor are they coming in when they're well. They're almost always coming in when they're sick. I think it's good to give perspective. I think to have that perspective that then when things do turn bad can be a little bit more motivating as your provider. So what does the worst patient look like? They're late. They miss appointments. They don't know what they're taking. I can tell you it would take two hands to count the number of patients, even this past week, came in and we had a hard time understanding and reconciling their medication list. And this is a big problem with AIH because I am always fine-tuning immunosuppression. And I may not remember off the cuff what I did last, or maybe I didn't even document it well. So again, it is a partnership. One thing I love about my great patients, they come in and say, hey, remember 2 months ago when you increased my azathioprine from 50 to 100, and I'm also down to 10 milligrams of prednisone? I've been doing pretty good on that. So that just helps me to kind of set in my mind where we are. Patients that are disinterested in learning, we have those as well. I want someone engaged, those that don't take notes, and also patients that just can't tell a story with their symptoms. And that kind of relates to me a little bit unpreparedness. And again, I have to realize patients are patients, but again, I would love for you to be able to characterize your symptoms to your doctor to make sure you are heard. So the worst patient visits, I was just thinking back, what have been the worst encounters I've had as a doctor? I've had a 30-minute discussion with a male who was supporting his wife about the nuances of his train collection, leaving about 2 minutes for me to talk about his wife's AIH. I've had family members in the room fighting, almost coming to blows, tears, not even related to disease, but other major issues. I've had a toddler climbing on me with a full diaper. I haven't heard or talked to you or seen you in 4-year visit, that's a tough one for me. I do remember you, yeah. And then the multiple phone calls patients. For some reason, the phone always rings when they're in my office. So again, it's silly, but it's worth saying, particularly for some reason, everybody wants to call my patient and say, how did it go? Well, I'm still with him right now. So again, be on time, know your medications, bring your journal, bring your questions. And again, this is incredibly important, and I love the itemized questions. I think it just helps us be more focused, patients and doctor. And then you can leave with actually like you've accomplished something. I think that's great, but again, bring that back up as well. I think following your doctor's agreed upon care. Now, this is not paternalistic medicine. You guys have talked, you've discussed, you've interacted. You've decided that either you're doing this or this is the compromise, but follow it. And when you don't follow it, let he or she know. Kind of finally, we've talked a little bit about stigmatization of this disease. We've heard about the dirty word hepatitis. We want to get rid of that. But let me also give you a call to action. I love when AIH patients talk openly about their disease and their struggles, especially to people that don't get it. I think educating yourself and being mindful of your voice and how you convey that messaging can speak volumes for this rare disease community. People do judge, there's no doubt. You get judged, you get stigmatized in your primary care doctor's office. I've heard it 100 times. In the emergency department. Well, what is AIH? I didn't know you had that problem. But I think also to reflect to you is harboring self-stigma, meaning you hide away, you don't encroach the question of AIH. I think we should all consider choosing empowerment and leaning into these issues, but doing it well. I like to give some advice. The problem is I don't have great advice, but I found a block of text that I thought was really meaningful, and I try to capitulate this to patients when I see them. So I'm just going to read this slide. There will always be people who aren't willing to try to learn more about conditions and their implications. And by the way, that means everyone in your life, and that includes healthcare workers. Their expectations of us will not change. So what has to happen is that our expectations of others must evolve. You can't persuade or enlighten people who don't choose to listen. So it's not worth feeling you need to justify yourself or your condition to them. Focus on the friends, the family, the interested acquaintances who want to know more, who come to you and ask questions for support, or even they admit they aren't familiar with a condition, but they want to be. These are open opportunities to change this disease in the future. So I'll finish with Bob Ross again. It's a little cheesy, but I like it. This is your AIH world. You are the creator. Find freedom on this canvas. Believe that you can do it, because you can do it. You can do it. Guys, thank you so much. It's been an awesome week. I really appreciate you coming. I'll stick around for a little bit. It was great to meet you all, too. Thank you.